Hello from the Heartland. My name is Jenna, and this is SmartHER News. News when it matters and why it matters. Our SmartHER series features unique people who help us think and live smarter. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to SmartHER News. My name is Jenna, and I'm really excited to have this conversation today. We have experienced so many historic moments together on SmartHER News over the last several years, and we have a fun one that we can actually anticipate. Not all historic moments you can anticipate, but this one we actually can. It's a total solar eclipse, and it's actually happening right over the top of SmartHER News headquarters here in Texas. So we should have a front row seat. Fingers crossed if the weather holds. And in fact, just kind of another news item related to this, the city of Austin has already declared a local disaster because of the crowds that are expected, because I guess viewing a total solar eclipse is like a really big deal, which I didn't really realize. And I hate to confess until now, but it is. So we have exactly the person to talk to about this topic. Emily Calandrelli has many different titles, I should mention. She is an MIT engineer. She's a New York Times bestselling author. By the way, new book, Stay Curious and Keep Exploring, Next Level. She has several books, by the way, so you have a lot to choose from, but a New York Times bestselling author. She's also a mother. I think that's always important to mention. And she's known as the Space Gal on social media. So you might find her there. It's actually where I was first discovering her work. And we reached out to her, and we're lucky to have her today. And Emily, it's really great to talk to you just in general, but about this really big event. So just to start out, because you always approach science with such enthusiasm, I have to ask you about this. How did you first get interested in science? What do you remember that moment where you're like, you know what? Science is the thing for me.
Yeah, I have a very funny story because I am unlike a lot of my peers in the STEM world. I was a very practical child because my dad grew up in poverty in West Virginia, and he worked really hard to bring our family to middle class. And so the importance of financial security was always something that was top of mind. And so, as a very practical high school senior who wanted to get a good job, make her dad proud, etc., I looked up all of the majors that you could major in college, and I looked at their starting salaries. And I'm telling you, that is how I chose to go into engineering when I was a kid. And I got into school. Engineering was one of the hard majors, and I thought that I was going to hate it. I thought it was going to be boring and hard, and I was just going to just hate the next 4 years of my life. But I got there, and I adored it. I found joy in the discovery. I found adventures. I was able to travel the world and do all of these unique experiences through things like Engineers Without Borders, flying on the Vomit Comet, doing microgravity research, working at NASA. I did all of these things for free or getting paid to do it because I was an aerospace engineering major. And so my story is one of sort of reluctantly joining it, thinking I was like a martyr and it was going to be awful, and then enthusiastically becoming obsessed with it. And now my goal is to try to make other people and other kids see that obsession sooner in life.
Can you tell me about the vomit comet?
Oh,
Because I feel like I might know of a vomit comet, but I think it's probably a different one than the one that you're talking about.
yeah, yeah.
That's
This
just from my
vomit
experience
comet,
as a mom. So
right?
please,
Yeah,
what is that?
all moms have vomit comets that are quite small in their own home. This one's a little different. It is like an 8,000-foot roller coaster in the sky. So it's literally just a plane that they gut out. They take out most of the seats, and in place of that, they put science experiments. And so this is like a rolling laboratory in the sky that goes up and down and up and down in this what we call parabolic motion. And it does that just because, like, when you are in a roller coaster and you go over a hump on a roller coaster and your butt lifts off your seat and you get some air time, and maybe you feel that butterfly feeling in your stomach for a little bit, the same feeling you get in a drop tower at Disney. You feel that feeling, that weightless feeling, for about 25 seconds. And in those 25 seconds, you can do flips, and you can walk on the ceiling, and you can soar from one end of the plane to the other. And you can also do science experiments, because things like water and fire and even cooking and exercising and all of these things work a little bit differently when you remove gravity from the equation. And so for humans to be able to work and live in outer space, we want to understand how all of these things operate differently in microgravity conditions and weightless conditions. And so as a student, I designed a science experiment with some of my classmates that NASA deemed good enough to fly on their vomit comet. And so as a student, I was able to fly weightless like an astronaut while I practiced my science research in the sky.
That's unbelievable, and it really proves the point that you were just making, which is maybe reluctant at first, but then have all these exciting, incredible experiences that one could maybe never imagine, such as the
Absolutely.
vomit comet. So, tell me a little bit more about your dad because you recently were posting about him on social media
Yeah.
and, just hearing about his story and seeing his face when he was able to visit the White House in part because of your work. Just tell us a little bit more about how he was an inspiration to you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So my dad is youngest of four kids to a single mom who grew up in poverty in West Virginia, living off government subsidies, moving from one home, one apartment to the next. It was just the stories that he tells from childhood are something that I can only like begin to try to empathize with, because I think if you haven't worked through poverty, you haven't lived through poverty, it is just something that you can never quite understand the anxieties and the trauma that goes along with that. And so I can just sort of try to understand my dad's position. But as the youngest of four kids, he worked since he was 11 years old. He was the only and first person in his family to go to college. Most didn't finish high school. And he was able to buy his family, as the youngest of four, their very first car. And he's just like, he's an inspiration to me because of his grit and perseverance despite all of the hardships. He tells stories of even the teachers at school making fun of him and his sisters for wearing the same outfits every day to school. And it just, that's one of the reasons why one of his sisters quit high school, was because a teacher was making fun of her publicly in front of her classmates for wearing the same clothes every day. And I can't imagine what that feels like. And so for him to be able to work to where my family was in middle class, it was just such a huge jump. And I just dreamed of being able to do a similar jump for my family one day.
So how did that jump happen from
Mm.
MIT and studying your craft and being really excited about science and falling in love with it to then building this amazing platform where you're reaching so many different people and getting them excited about science too?
Yeah, it's funny because I studied engineering for 8 years. I have 2 degrees in undergrad, mechanical and aerospace engineering from West Virginia University, and then I went to MIT for 2 different master's degrees, one in aeronautics and astronautics, so rocket science type of stuff, and then the other one in technology and policy. And so my original career path when I was at MIT was I was going to go to DC and influence science and technology policy. I was always interested in the policy side of things and having just a voice in how the research is mandated, and how we just implement science strategy in the United States. I loved the idea that you could influence that. And when I was graduating from MIT, I got a call from a production company that asked if I wanted to be the host of a new space TV show. And I'd never done TV before. Like, I'd never done on camera work before. This was totally out of the blue. I was like, quote unquote, discovered in a way because I had some articles written about me and some commercials where I was promoting the engineering colleges that I was a part of. And I said yes, because while they weren't paying me a ton of money to do it, and it wasn't a huge production company, it wasn't going to be a huge TV show or anything like that. I was going to be the first woman in the United States with her own nationwide science show. And I was like, man, what a cool opportunity to maybe influence science in the United States from a different angle, from a different way. And so I said yes, and then just tried to run with it as much as I could. So for every single episode, I'm posting on Twitter, I'm posting on Facebook, I'm posting on Instagram. I'm like trying to share everything I'm learning at the time. And I'm just slowly building up my social media profile. And then fast forward a decade, because it's been a decade, I have over 2 million followers on social media who are used to hearing me explain science and space in a way that hopefully they can understand, in a way that doesn't make them feel stupid. It makes them feel welcome and excited to ask questions and be involved in that curiosity. And so it's been like quite a ride. And I'm constantly, I have my hand in a bunch of different things. But yeah, it all started with that one call from a producer back when I graduated MIT.
That is an amazing, amazing story, and we really identify with this at Smarter News. One of our taglines is curiosity over commentary, trying to make the news more accessible to everyone, and to really embrace curiosity and the liberty of asking questions, because that's where
Yeah.
a free press can really function and contribute. So I really,
Mm.
that really resonates with me. I'm sure so many of our audience hearing you speak about your mission, it resonates with them too. Real quick, before, because I would definitely want, now that we know your background, talking about the eclipse is going to be easy because it's not rocket science. It's not exactly. But
That's
did
right.
you come up
That's
with
right.
the space gal? Were you the person that said I'm the space gal, or
I
did that?
I
Where did
mean,
that come from?
I studied aerospace engineering for 8 years, and my handle ever since I wasn't even on TV or did any sort of social media stuff was MCal Space Gal. So Emily Calandrelli, my nickname since high school was MCal, and it was MCal Space Gal. And I noticed that people, like when I told people I was MCal Space Gal on social media, they thought it was like moo, like cow. And it was just a hard thing to get people to find me. So I'm just like, I'm going to shorten that a little bit, make it a little
Yeah.
bit easier.
Isn't it funny how these little decisions suddenly put you on a different course?
Yes,
So,
exactly.
but we'll remember that MCal, the space gal. That's how we
Yeah.
know. That's how you got here. Okay, let's get to the eclipse a little bit, because that was maybe this is it's a little bit of a trick conversation, because now we got this great story about your life. We have so many probably other questions for you too, Emily. But let's talk a little bit about this eclipse. What is it exactly? By the way, everyone talks about, okay, solar eclipse is happening. I mean, you really have had to not be on social media or around any
Yeah.
media at all to know this isn't happening. But you may not know this is happening. It's happening on Monday, April 8th. But if someone was like, so what's really going on with the solar eclipse? Like, being able to say it may not just roll off the tongue. So what
Yeah.
is happening and why does it matter?
Yeah. So the way that I explain it to my kids is that they're 4, and well, the 2-year-old doesn't really understand anything that's going on, but the 4-year-old, the way do I explain it to her is that we have a moon that orbits around the Earth, but our Earth also orbits around the sun. So we've got a lot of moving pieces, but sometimes when we're lucky, all 3 of those pieces are aligned. They're all in a line. It's the Earth and then the moon and then the sun. And so, a total solar eclipse is when the moon completely blocks out the sun in the daytime sky. And this happens like a couple of times a year because it lines up a couple of times a year. But for a given location, it only happens once every 400 years. Because if Earth is 70% water. So a lot of times these happen over the water, over the ocean, and nobody gets to see them. But for this to happen in the United States is a big deal because the next total solar eclipse that's going to cross the United States like this won't be till 2044. So something like this won't happen again for another 20 years, which is why I think there's so much press on this, because everybody's like, go look at this now because you're going to be in a totally different state of life in 20 years and you may not be able to see this again.
I was trying to do the math, by the way, in my head when I read that as we were preparing for this interview. I'm like, how old? And then I was like, you know what? I just don't even want to know. I don't want to think about it. I just want to know, feel like I have that option still,
Yeah,
and
yeah, oh yeah,
I might
exactly.
be there.
Yeah,
Uh,
we'll be there.
we'll be there. We'll be there.
Mhm.
So the historic nature of it is the fact that it's not necessarily that it doesn't happen on a regular basis. It's just that it's happening in a way that a lot of Americans are going to have access to it, and that it's
That's
historic,
exactly
and that we're going to see it together for in a broad swath of the country.
That's exactly right. And you'll meet some really dedicated eclipse chasers that will travel to Chile, or they'll travel to Africa, or they'll travel across the country to Asia, and they'll find the eclipse wherever it lands. But like for one to be within a driving distance or a short flight, like that's a pretty big deal.
What is the path of totality?
It goes from Texas up to Maine, I think might be the last one in the United States. And so, yeah, it'll start around 12:30 local time in Texas. I'm going to be watching from Dallas, and then it'll end somewhere around 3:30 local time up in the northern part of the United States. And this total solar eclipse is actually really unique because the moon, its orbit, sometimes it's closer to us and sometimes it's a little bit farther away. And depending on when we catch the eclipse, the moon will be either bigger in the sky or smaller in the sky, depending on how close it is. And luckily, we're catching this eclipse when the moon is relatively closer to us in its orbit. And that means that it's going to be bigger in the night sky and it's going to cover the sun for a little bit longer. So, for example, this total solar eclipse is about twice as long as the one that we saw in 2017, 7 years ago. So it's going to be a longer eclipse, like a longer totality. It's going to be longer for about like 3 to 4 minutes in
And it
total.
and if you're not in the path of totality, meaning that's where you're gonna see the full coverage of
Right.
the sun, will you still see something? Will you see
Exactly.
anything?
So, and yeah, you'll definitely see something. So, in every part of the United States, you'll be able to see at least a partial solar eclipse. So, anybody from the United States who's listening, it is worth getting solar eclipse glasses to look at the sun because you're going to be able to see it turn into sort of a crescent moon shape as the moon blocks out part of it. But the closer you get to totality, you'll be able to see the moon block out more and more and more of the sun. And then along the path of totality, which means it covers it 100%, you'll be able to see the daytime completely turn into nighttime for about 3 to 4 minutes.
Have you ever seen it before?
I was there for the 2017 one. I also didn't know that it was a big deal. I was just hired to be an MC at this event in Tennessee, in like the mountains of Tennessee. And I was blown away. I could not believe how absolutely breathtakingly miraculous it felt to see totality because it feels like, I don't know. It feels like the gods are talking to you. It feels like what it might feel like if everybody witnessed like an asteroid coming to Earth together. It has that like eerie feeling of maybe you're all witnessing alien life together or something. I don't know. It was so, so cool that this time, like, we paid a stupid amount of money and moved around a bunch of different things to be able to get my entire family to Dallas on Monday. I'm leaving on Friday, and I cannot wait to go see this.
So tell me a little bit about these glasses because if anyone has heard this, everyone has heard this
Yeah.
in their life, in their childhood. Don't look at the sun, it'll burn your eyes. Although again, the science behind that, we may not be able to totally explain, but I find myself saying that to my children as well. Don't look
Yeah.
directly at the sun, it's going to burn your eyes. First of all, Emily, is it really going to burn your eyes? And how do we know if the glasses are good? Because there's a lot of glasses out there
Yes.
and I see them all over the place. And now I'm worried that I'm gonna give my kids permission or myself to look at this eclipse
Yeah.
with glasses that aren't good. So, how
Yes.
what is really the risk, and how do you know how you can protect yourself?
I got you. This is the most important part of the eclipse because more people will be looking at the sun because it feels a little bit easier to look at the sun as the moon starts to cover more and more of it. But it is not safe to look at the sun at any point in time other than if you are on the path of totality and during that 3 to 4 minutes when it is completely covered. That is the only time you're allowed to look at the sun. You're allowed, like, the cops will come after you. You're allowed to look at the sun without your solar eclipse glasses because eye doctors will tell you they see an influx of patients with holes burned into their retina after solar eclipses because so many more people feel it feels easier to look at the sun. Like, if you try to look at the sun right now, your natural reaction will be to like move away. Like, your body knows that. But as it becomes a little bit less bright, it feels like it should be okay. It's not okay. It's not okay. You don't want to end up in the eye doctor because that's permanent damage. That is a hard to fix problem that you will have for the rest of your life, like a little nice tattoo on the back of your eye for the total solar eclipse. And so you don't want
So,
that to happen.
our parents were right. There's many things they may have told us that were not true, but this one is
Yeah,
true. It will burn your eyes, don't do
this
it.
one holds true. It'll literally burn your retinas. Don't do it. And so the way that you find out if your glasses are safe is that there is a certification called ISO 12312 2. And every certified eclipse glasses will say this on the glasses. Now that's part one. Part two is that you can go to AAS, I think it's AAS.org. It's the American Astronomical Society. They have certified suppliers of eclipse glasses, and they have like this whole list of like companies that they have done their own personal check mark of to say that their glasses are good, their glasses are safe. So look at that 123-2 certification that will be written on the glasses, and then check the American Astronomical Society for approved companies. But I also, like, for me, I have a link in my bio for approved glasses. I'm just like, just go there. Those are the ones I bought for my family. They're safe. They're good.
I'm actually gonna make sure that those are in the show notes as well. We're gonna direct everybody to your site, Emily, because we know that you provide really good information, and it's confusing, and they're handing them out everywhere. At least in Texas, you could, which is
Yeah.
great, by the way,
Oh, right.
if they're safe. But if they're not, we just wanna be able to check. Um,
Yeah.
I'm very curious about the other things that we could learn from this eclipse. I was going through the different science experiments or
Mm,
observations that scientists are trying
yeah.
to make during this time. So here's a few that were just listed in the New York Times. One was saying that researchers are going to learn how the sun's magnetism drives the solar wind or particles that stream through the solar system. One is saying another study is studying deviations in the shape of the solar surface, which will help understand the sun's churning behavior. There's some research that's being done that will apparently help us improve weather forecasting. And then there is this other one, and I know I'm giving you a list, but I just want to kind of just hop around and see what's most interesting to you. This one was taking a look at radio operators that are going to try to send signals to each other
Mhm.
across the path of totality to study how the density of electrons in Earth's upper atmosphere changes. Obviously, I'm reading this, by the way, it's not from memory. And what they're saying is that this is going to help quantify how space weather
Yep.
produced by the sun can disrupt or not radio communication systems. So, I mean,
Mhm.
those are just things, again, I'm not really thinking about. What can we possibly learn, or what are you going to be watching when it comes to this body of research that's taking place during this time? What really stands out as something interesting that we could learn
Yeah.
from the total solar eclipse?
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting because the sun is something that you see in the sky and it looks like this stagnant point of light that is just like a constant. It rises and it sets, but it looks just like yellow all the time. But really, it is this bubbling, burping, active body in our solar system that is spitting out energetic particles to us all the time. Now, the sun also goes through cycles where it has a peak cycle, peak part of the cycle where it's spitting out more energetic particles more frequently, and a low part of its cycle where it doesn't do that as much. We are currently at the peak part of the solar cycle. And so there's going to be a lot of energetic particles to keep an eye on. And it's not completely understood exactly how long these cycles are or the peaks and the troughs of that cycle, and so they're going to be able to hopefully be get some more data on that. And the reason why that matters is because those energetic particles come towards Earth. Those are the things that create our northern lights. The sun's energetic particles that go all the way to Earth create our northern lights. They excite atoms in our upper atmosphere and it makes them change colors, and it's really beautiful. But it can also be very dangerous because those energetic particles can also damage our satellites. The satellites that provide, say, GPS or national security and reconnaissance or communications or TV or radio, whatever it is, those satellites can be harmed by really energetic particles that come from the sun. So there are scientists that study solar weather, just like meteorologists study Earth weather. And so getting a better idea of how that all operates can benefit life here on Earth.
Are you expecting the unexpected on Monday because of this? Is there
Mm.
anything that you're wondering, like, "Whoa, what could happen during this solar eclipse?"
Yeah, I wish that I was going to be in a. I will. I'm going to be in the Dallas Arboretum watching this, and I'm hoping that there's a lot of nature around because what I remember from the 2017 eclipse is that when totality happened, I was in this huge crowd and it was really loud and everybody was dancing. There was music. And then as soon as totality hit, everybody, including nature itself, went silent. And I swear I heard crickets, and it felt like nature started to believe that it was nighttime, and everybody was so quiet, and it felt colder, like it noticeably got colder when the sun was blocked. And I want to see what happens again because I have this memory of that happening back in 2017. And I'm excited to be in a crowd watching it because I think that adds a special element of like experiencing something with humanity together collectively. But I'm also excited to be around nature and I want to keep my eyes on nature and see like what they do. Because humans are a bit more predictable. You know, we're all gonna look up, but I'm like, what are the squirrels gonna do? What are the birds gonna do? Like, what is
Right.
nature know?
Well, it's in those situations that they seem wiser than us for sure.
Yeah.
And grew up in San Francisco and we had the saying earthquake weather, it'd be a beautiful clear day and suddenly all the animals would go away and you would say, "Oh, this is earthquake weather. They're feeling something." And whether or not that an earthquake would happen or you could predict that, I don't have a track record of that. But
Yeah.
it was an expression just in the community because there was a noticeable shift. And I can definitely relate. We had a partial solar eclipse in the fall here, and I wasn't expecting it. And that sudden darkness and that sudden chill that came into the air was a little bit unnerving, and it's hard to articulate exactly how it feels. It feels so, primitive. It's a very difficult thing to express. And so, not having the science background, I don't want to go down the deep dark holes anywhere because there's no way back. But I was wondering, well, is there something with satellites? Is there anything that we do? I need to get emergency gear? I don't know if there's a scientific
Hmm.
explanation for that. It was just sort of that feeling of like, could something unexpected happen just because of this? Um, but
Oh,
again,
interesting. I think the only thing that will be unexpected to most people will be how much traffic there is in their city. That is the only
yes,
thing that
yes.
I'm, like, really preparing for.
Yes, absolutely. Well, you've been so generous with your time. I really am excited about witnessing this, as you mentioned, as a community, really as a country together. And so I have a final kind of non-science question for you, because as I was doing research, obviously I was going deep into the science side, but then I was getting a little bit into the metaphysical, a little bit into the astrology, and this question of, solar eclipses bringing a new chapter. This was
Yeah,
another, see, there's so many different paths you could go down. I'm like, what do you
yeah,
think of, just as someone with a science background, what do you think of that? Again, sort of this feeling that maybe you can't explain, that
yeah.
there's a shift that can take place when you watch something like this or experiencing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it feels, like, spiritual, I feel like it feels witchy, I feel like if you are sort of into those celestial moments that are unique and you're looking for something to kind of, like, shift something in your life, this is the moment. This is so cool to be able to witness, and while it's not unique to the planet, it is unique to whatever location you're in, and so I think there is a lot of power there. It does feel really magical. And I think that if you want to, if you're looking for something to kind of infuse positivity into your life, like, yeah, go for it. This is the moment. This is it.
I love it. I think I'm gonna take that and run with it, Emily. We're gonna get all the candles out. Let's just
Hmm.
have the moment. And you know
It's
what? You mentioned that, there's a lot of news coverage. I was thinking about this while we were talking. This just gives us all an opportunity to talk about something different other than politics,
yeah.
other than a lot of the serious things that are important in the world that obviously we'll continue to cover. But this is something interesting and different. And we get to learn about it, which is one of the great things about being a journalist, is to explore these topics. So thank you so much for doing that with us. Just a final thought from you. When you always like to ask our guests this, we always want to live a little bit smarter. It's not just about smarter news, it's about living smarter. Is there one fact that stands out to you about the total solar eclipse or just science in general that you think is interesting that you'd like to share with our audience that they could kind of keep in their back pocket as something that they learned today about how to think smarter about science or the eclipse?
Yeah, well, I think the one thing that I want people to know is that There are many different ways to experience this. People are often asking me, like, what am I bringing to the total solar eclipse? And I am bringing a disco ball and I am bringing a colander from my kitchen, because if you're looking for other ways to see what's happening without directly looking at the sun, or for example, if you have really little kids that you don't want to even encourage them to try to look at the sun, this is another way to do it, because the disco ball will reflect the image of the crescent sun on all of your, like, your walls and your floors and everything. It'll be a very cool way to see the shape across your room. And then same with the colander, it'll act like a pinhole projector where it will project the image of the sun as a shadow onto the floor. And so these are just the different ways that I'm viewing the eclipse, because the entire experience will be around 3 hours long. The totality, if you're along the line, will only be 3 to 4 minutes, but the entire experience where the moon is slowly going in front of the sun will be 3 hours. So you have time to play with it and to do all these different things.
And it's nice to have those tools in your back pocket too,
Yeah.
just in case you need a little something extra. I love that. Is the disco ball also at the link in bio, Emily? So we're gonna
Yeah,
need a Space Gal disco ball. Do you already
that's
have that? Do
right.
we need a branding deal? What
We
are we
need a
gonna do?
branding deal from
We
the
need a
disco ball
branding deal.
manufacturers.
Why do we where is it that we need that immediately, at least before 2045? Is that the next one? And you said
Yeah,
2040 some,
2044.
so
We
at
have some
least before
time.
then.
Yeah,
Okay, but I'm gonna work on that. If there's one thing that we're gonna help the space gal with, it's her own disco ball because she needs it.
that's
Emily,
great.
thank you so much. This was so much fun. We learned a lot and we really appreciate your work. We're going to encourage everybody to check out your books and obviously your website as well, and put all of that in our show notes so they have that quick and easy and accessible. But thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thanks so much.
Quick, concise, nonpartisan, smarter news, a refuge from the storm. I'm Jenna. Thank you for choosing smarter.